The truth is young men that look like a men's health fitness cover model, but they can't get an erection. They've got horrible digestion. It's the world of social media, and the fitness industry is very top of that. You know, at my very biggest and at my leanest, I was absolutely miserable.
Jack Boon is a health and performance coach.
Jack has transformed the lives of both men and women,
helping them find better health, drop fat, and unlock new energy levels.
As of 2022 in Australia, 66% of adults were obese, which is around 13 million people. What do you think are some of the biggest drivers?
There is no denying energy balance. If you consume more calories than what you exert, you will gain weight. You can treat your body like a garbage bin and fucking get away with it, but you can get away with it until you can't. And for most people, around their mid to late 20s, where it does start to catch up to too much alcohol, not enough sleep, not enough nutrition, and probably some nutrient deficiencies. So you're either building sex hormones or you're building stress hormones. How much have you actually looked inward and go, who do I want to be as a person? How do I want to show up in this world? What are my values? What is important to me? And then we're starting to obviously make our decisions based around those values. Something that really upsets me in the industry is, a lot of these guys are, 20 years old. They shouldn't even be in the conversation of PEDs yet. They're just cutting their own legs off, basically putting themselves into a position where, hey, you may be subjected to testosterone replacement therapy for the rest of your life.
Now, I originally saw on your Instagram, so you mentioned about, getting to the stage with your training where you're not necessarily trying to be a professional athlete. You're not looking for that perfect training program as per se, and that could just a good condition that allows you to do a lot in life and excel in those day-to-day tasks. Why do you think that's so important for the general person?
Well, firstly, I don't know if it's so much not necessarily trying to be like an athlete. If anything, it's more trying to hold on to that athleticism, given that that's something that's always been kind of important to me. But, like a lot of people that find themselves working in the fitness industry, the initial goals are to be as big and lean as they possibly can, and they go the bodybuilding route, you could say. And I guess as life has continued to evolve, along with your values as a person and what's important to you and what motivates you, a lot of the necessity or desire to be that certain physique has diminished, which I think is signs of healthy progress, you could say. And it's some of the consequences of that style of training, you could say, have started to catch up to me now in my early to mid 30s. And, I continue to want to be able to stay youthful and young for as long as possible. So in my mind, what's going to enable that and sort of act as insurance, you could say, is starting to have a much heavier emphasis on, incorporating transverse movements and functional, if you will, despite how much that word's been bashed over the last decade, and doing things that have got more transferable application to everyday life and sports. So, pain or trying to have lack thereof it is a big motivator.
Yeah. So some of the things you said that you're running into now, what are some of those things?
Yeah, just, wear and tear. I've had 3 knee surgeries now. I've got some shoulder issues, which is just sort of probably a combination of years and years of pressing and maybe lacking a little bit of structural balance. And again, just having lived a life that's been very orientated around sports and physicality for the best part of 30 years and wanting to continue to, train jiu-jitsu and even fucking play golf. You know what I mean? The training is very different now, but whether it be someone who's, had a similar story to what I am, or whether that you've spent most of your time on your ass at a desk, you're probably going to encounter some similar kind of problems just with your own makeup of them there, with the pain from lack of movement, So a lot of that training style is going to benefit not just the athlete, but also probably the sedentary person that has, avoided movement.
Mm. How much do you think also from a mental standpoint has it changed for you personally, like shifting your way away from maybe that more aesthetic approach to then that lifestyle approach where you're still like putting in the work? Like this is not saying, go through your merry dairy day and do fuck all in the gym. Like you might be training hard, you're doing jiu-jitsu and you're training obviously as someone, I've recently only just started doing jiu-jitsu in the last few weeks and it's a hard bloody thing to do. Like it's intense. But how are you then, how has that mindset changed around aesthetic versus, what it is now?
Yeah, look, the transition's been hard actually, and it's been interesting to have these conversations with people that have gone through a similar transition because, um, again, I feel pretty confident to make the statement that a lot of what drives people to be extraordinary in terms of the amount of muscle on their frame often comes from maybe a little bit of a dark place
Yeah.
or a place where you're not necessarily sure of yourself or not a lot of self love perhaps. So that that big frame kind of becomes a part of your identity, and so learning to not, I suppose, measure your self worth and value as a human being and as a man based off what you weigh on the scales or what you can bench press sounds pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
but when you lived that life for the best part of a decade or more, it can be really hard to can be really hard to become comfortable with the changes that happen in your body. Like I put it down to a lot of men, especially ones that spend time in the gym. The last thing we want to hear is someone go, "Oh, have you lost weight?" And normally women would be over the moon when people say that to them, but it's kind of the male version of saying to a chick, "Oh, have you gained weight? Have you
Yeah.
got fat?" So it's even though people don't mean any malice with those compliments, it does present it does present challenges at time because at the end of the day, being massive is cool. It's cool to have been able to do that more just from an observation point of view of what the human body is capable of and what you were capable of, and to look back at some of those photos and even go, "Fuck, you really were big. You built a physique." But the crazy thing um, with that is in the time where I was 10 kilos heavier than what I am now and walking around lean, not once did I ever feel like I actually was big. There was a
Yeah.
hell of a body dysmorphia, you could say, that was the driving force behind, the motivation to train in such a psychopathic way, and where that comes from. I mean, mate, we could go for days on that conversation. It
Mm.
could be watching violent movies at too young of an age and admiring, those images of masculinity. You know what I mean? So it could be fucking anything. But yeah, I don't know. Sorry, that's a bit of a tangent from answering your specific
Mm.
question.
No, I think it's good because I think there's that balance there as well, where like having that bit of, I guess, the dog within you as well, like is a really healthy thing for men to have. And a lot of my audience is men. So it's really good to have these conversations as well. But understanding that you don't want to be controlled by some of those other factors as well. Like, I guess, especially in the bodybuilding, the aesthetic community, the insecurity is just huge. Like there's a big reason why guys obviously, hopping on gear and doing all these other things as well. It's like, just because what you see on the outside may be this big, strong, massive guy, but what you don't see is that insecurity or that mindset that they actually have, which is their lack of, and that constant chase for wanting more because they don't feel like they're good enough, even though they're 120 kilos jacked, benching 150 kilos.
Right, for sure. And it's the world of social media, and the fitness industry is, I feel, the very top of that. In terms of the examples of not being what you're demonstrating on that platform, because
Yeah.
the truth is, and I've experienced it myself, is at my very biggest and at my leanest, I was absolutely miserable mentally. And most people aren't going to talk about these things publicly, and I don't necessarily blame them for doing so. To feel obligated to wear your heart on your sleeve and have your vulnerabilities shown to a bunch of random strangers that you don't know. But in the private coaching space, a lot of what goes on behind closed doors, given that we're talking about men specifically here, is there's young men that look like a men's health fitness cover model,
Mm.
but they can't get an erection. They've got horrible digestion. They're riddled with anxiety and mental health, and despite um, you know looking the part, really struggling with I suppose a healthy balance of masculinity where they're sure of themselves and don't need to compensate with aggression, you could say.
Yeah. So what are some of the things like strategies, like you obviously work quite a lot with men as well, that you're trying to work through with? I'm sure you have clients that have this similar sort of mindsets that maybe you once had around training and things like that. How do you try and, like, it's easy to say and be like, oh, well, it doesn't need to be a priority in your life. Like there's so many other great things out there and smell the roses a little bit. But to that person, they're like, well, no, this is my life. Like, so how are you trying to reframe some of that?
Yeah, good question. I don't ever come from a place where I try and tell someone what to do. Rather, be a voice of reason, give them somewhere where we can have a very open conversation about it. And I view it as my role and responsibility rather to just um, deliver you as much information as I can from my knowledge base about um, the pros and the cons that are going into the decisions that you're either contemplating or that you have made, and then ultimately enable you to make that decision from a position of knowledge, and one that you feel comfortable with. And sometimes that's an easy conversation, sometimes it's not such an easy conversation, and at the end of the day, people need to go through what they need to go through to become who they're going to become, if that makes sense. And it might need to get worse before it can become better. And, there's, sure, I've worked with guys in that realm we've spoken about that have, suffered from PED abuse, particularly from a young age. Like I see that. That's something that really upsets me in the industry, is that there's a lot of PTs and a lot of coaches out there that are probably in and around the bodybuilding culture, and them themselves are obviously on PEDs, and then they attract clients that want to obtain a physique that looks like theirs. So then PEDs becomes a part of that conversation, and then they help source the drugs for the client. They obviously profit from the sale of those drugs, and then that helps fund their own drug taking behavior, because these things are really expensive. There are guys, it is not that unheard of to hear of people spending upwards of 20,000 up to $50,000 a year on PEDs. So the cycle is rinse and repeat. You get really, really good before and after photos that are hella marketable because of the time frame. You guess what? Steroids work. And then so what? You attract more impressionable young males that want to get those same outcomes and get the validation that comes with it. And it's rinse and repeat. And the scary thing about it is, like, a lot of these guys are 20 years old. They shouldn't even be in the conversation of PEDs yet. They haven't put together 5 years of consistent training. They still have work to do with their technique or intensity, nutrition, lifestyle habits. Like, there's so much. They're just cutting their own legs off. um, you know Basically putting themselves into a position where, hey, you may be subjected to testosterone replacement therapy for the rest of your life, and potentials for infertility down the line if you're not managing this appropriately.
Yeah, and I guess you can really understand, as I know I'm only 24, and so recently, going through, I guess it's not that long ago, the teenage years of being exposed to social media and these influences from specific brands, and you can see the attraction, I guess, there then when you're exposed to, oh, so if I hop on this stuff, even if it does cost someone 20 grand a year, they go, yeah, but I'm going to make 400 a year because of these sponsorships and selling my programs and all this. So you can see where that incentive, and then to a young mind that doesn't really understand and can really see all of this come together as a whole, they see the very narrow, small, short term. It's very easy to go down that dangerous road.
Yeah, like, you try telling a 21-year-old not to do that. They don't give a fuck. They're reckless, I was exactly the same way when I was young, and some of those lessons have been hard learned. But thankfully, I was always petrified of the PED world, and what could come from it. So managed to get through with caution. But as I was saying, I don't necessarily work so much with that demographic of people these days. Rather, more so men that are perhaps in their late 20s, 30s, and looking almost for that transition of from a life of hedonism, if you will, and starting to take a little bit more responsibility and living a life based around their values and understanding that, the combustion of the world, if you will. Let's call it spade a spade. The stress is here. We've got the financial pressures, the economy, the cost of living's gone up with COVID, all these sorts of things. Lack of purpose, drugs and alcohol have probably gone up, and into the habits of boozing just because it's a Friday night, and looking to break that cycle, which obviously initially requires amounts of discipline, but once I guess the fruits begin to blossom from the trees, it becomes a lot less about discipline, and I see men becoming their own motivation because they're seeing the reward from making the difficult decision.
Yeah, yep. So some of that trying to reframe like where these guys are getting purpose from, like so, or maybe finding purpose that they haven't had at all in their life.
Yeah, I think just I think there's so many blokes out there that really like how much have you actually looked inward and go, who do I want to be as a person? How do I want to show up in this world? What are my values? What is important to me? And then we're starting to obviously make our decisions based around those values. Does it align with them? Yes or no? It becomes a lot easier in the decision making process to actually put yourself first. It's again selfish to be making a decision selfishly is something that's often brushed with a negative connotation, but in my mind, I kind of think of it, if you're not making the selfish decision, the thing that's actually the best for you, then what the fuck are you doing? You only get one shot at this life. And if you're not being the very best version of yourself, then how much value can you be to others around you?
Yeah. Well, that's it. I guess that selfish decision is in fact quite selfless because of the person then you're going to be to your family and your friends.
Exactly.
So now we're talking about obviously, maybe these guys that are higher 20s, lower 30s, maybe they're feeling the effects of the quote unquote low testosterone. What are some of the things, natural ways that men can be increasing this? Obviously, some things along the line of training, but what are some other factors there?
Yeah, man, for sure. I think a couple that stand out that need to be addressed is firstly lifestyle from sleep perspective is probably a big one. We know that like we call a dysfunctional night's sleep 6 hours or less, and that's going to be a massive one because I think the research shows something along as little as 2 nights of dysfunctional sleep can halve a man's testosterone. So sleep being a big one, we know that we spend so much time attached to our screens, whether that be on phones, whether it be on TVs, whether it be laptops. So obviously, all that blue light is disrupting, melatonin secretion and our ability to get to sleep and having good quality sleep. When we look at the quality of sleep as well, we could go down the path of, breathing mechanics. Are they a nose breather or are they a mouth breather? As those two actions are going to be very different from a nervous system point of view, one of them being sympathetic, one of them being parasympathetic. So sleep is probably the first thing that I'd be looking at for people. The second one we could probably go down to is heat, right? So, our testes are on the outside of our body in a sack for a reason, and they operate best cool. So again, we're often wearing tight, hugging underwear. Polyester is a common material that is, within our underwear brands. So polyester has also been shown in clinical trials to be quite effective as a contraception for men. So throwing out the shitty cheap underwear and looking for something that's more of an organic cotton and perhaps a little bit looser fitting. I'm a big advocate for the benefits of sauna, but at the same time, if you're struggling with testosterone or you're struggling with fertility, perhaps sauna might not be the best intervention for you at this time, or if you do engage in regular sauna, that perhaps you might consider using an ice pack on the testes. As random as that sounds, some of you may be familiar with Lucas Owen, who's a friend of mine, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with him as well. He's a big one for icing the gonads. You can actually get specific underwear that holds ice pack pouches in them, and as little as 10 minutes a day can be beneficial to testosterone. When we look down the, I suppose, supplemental route, there are some things that have been, I guess, quite popular in the media of more recent times. Tongat Ali being one of the big ones that stands out. And if we're looking at testosterone versus free testosterone, sometimes people have got good testosterone, but their free testosterone is quite low because a lot of it is bound, and they're going to see that on their blood reports the sex hormone binding globulin, so SHBG, is going to be quite high. So things like stinging nettle root and boron can be quite effective at freeing up some of that testosterone, making it more available, I guess, to you. Ridding things of inflammation from a dietary point of view. So anything that's really high in refined sugars or vegetable and seed oils seems to have a negative impact on men's testosterone levels. So again, as you can kind of see, it doesn't probably come down to one particular thing, rather than looking at the total picture. That seems to be too much alcohol, not enough sleep, not enough nutrition, too many inflammatory food groups, and probably some nutrient deficiencies. So even when we look at the nutrient deficiencies, for example, we got to look at gut health. That is going to be a big part of it, because many people are familiar with the term "you are what you eat," but we could say what's truer than that is you are what you absorb. So if you've got a level of permeability in the gut, or you've got insufficient stomach acid, then you're going to have a hard time breaking down those foods and actually assimilating the nutrients from it, and then enzymatically supporting the production of testosterone, which requires many cofactors. It's not just there. And if you've got poor digestion, poor bile function, then you're going to have a hard time absorbing your fats and building cholesterol, which is where our testosterone is derived from. So it's definitely a multifactorial issue that seems to be creating this low testosterone epidemic.
Yeah, yeah. And so would I imagine stress comes into a large part of that, like you mentioned before, the stress, the financial stress, all these other factors as well, the physical and mental stress, not one standing alone.
For sure. I mean, that's another saying that I really like, is you're either building sex hormones or you're building stress hormones. So we're usually going down one path or the other, but it's enzymatically a lot shorter to create cortisol than what it is testosterone, despite both of those things starting from the same compound in pregnenolone. So I definitely going to be encouraging all men to be employing a degree of stress management, and that comes down to having a level of self-awareness, having the ability to accept the reality of what's going on around you, and substituting perhaps some of the not so beneficial stress management strategies that you have in place at the moment, i.e. drinking and smoking, and replacing some of those things with whether it be exercise, whether it be meditation, whether it be journaling, whether it be breath work, whether it be engaging in some help from a trained psychologist. And I think it's good. I think more and more people are becoming comfortable with that idea. But again, it's something that I'm definitely a big advocate for. And it doesn't always have to be about doom and gloom and depression, rather than a proactive choice to go down a path of self-discovery and understand how you tick, which is going to put you back in the driver's seat ultimately, and support you in that mission of living a life based on purpose and around your values of what you want to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. Like it's, personally, I can put my hand up and say, like, I've gone and talked to psychologists in the past before, and it's not because I was sitting there crying in a corner necessarily either. It was because I wanted like optimal performance. I was like, my mind, I didn't feel like I was operating at my higher level. There was a few things going on in life, and you just sometimes need someone that can step out from an external perspective and give you that guidance as well, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Someone who doesn't have a bias agenda to
I think I might have
be
lost
a
you.
yes man, but just lost you there.
Oh, sorry, I lost you
We
for a
back?
little bit there. I think internet might have gone a bit wonky. All right, we're on. Sorry.
Yeah, I
Cool.
was just saying that definitely I agree with you with the psychologist. It's very powerful to have somebody there who's not connected to your inner circles and isn't a part of your friendship group, so they don't have any biases there, and you can use them however you best choose. But if you've got big decisions to make, if there's something that you're uncertain about in your mind, to use as a little fact checker or a
Mm.
bullshit detector, maybe, of the story that you're telling yourself.
Yeah, perfect. No, 100%. Now, wanting to dive into a little bit more of the weight loss, obviously that's, weight plays a role in these conversations of testosterone and things like that as well. But, as of 2022 in Australia, I think 66% of adults were overweight or obese, which is around 13 million people above the age of 18, which is obviously massive. What do you think are some of the biggest drivers that are leading people down to this obesity path?
Yeah, well, without being too negative, I think as a society inherently we've become quite soft and sensitive. And due to those things, everything has become about convenience. And unfortunately, and I'm only, I'm drawing from our evolutionary roots of hunter-gatherer type lifestyle, and that was the meaning of life, not so long ago. And evolution is a really fucking slow process. So I don't think we've necessarily adapted to the modern environment and the type of calories that we are consuming now, and we are unfortunately heavily surrounded by processed food. It is a very big business, and without probably opening up the conspiracy chest, when you start to look down at who owns these big food corporations, they're usually in bed or are the same bed as the pharmaceutical industry. So it's a lot of these very calorie dense, nutrient poor foods that are contributing to excess of calories, which is contributing to weight gain, which is then causing metabolic dysfunction and disease, which then has a Western healthcare system that manages these issues with prescription medications. So don't get me wrong, there is no denying energy balance. It's a thing. If you consume more calories than what you exert, you will gain weight, and vice versa in the opposite direction. So I really, I for a long time have kind of given calorie counting a bit of a shit bagging, and have boo-hooed it because it's just, unfortunately for the most people that engage in, a PT or a health coach or a fitness professional, the typical route they're going to get put on is to count the calories. But the reality is, for a lot of people, that they might be lawyers, they got families, they really struggle with the compliance. So us as human beings are inherently very bad at tracking our calories. We also have our bias and sometimes leave things out because of guilt or whatever it may be. But if that's all you learn and you don't actually gain any nutritional literacy into, what micronutrients are within the food and what's actually going to have a good ROI from a nutritional investment, then as soon as you put that calorie counter down, you're probably going to revert back to, a less desirable body composition, because you haven't actually addressed things like satiety. You haven't actually addressed things like your digestion. And you might be young and you might be able to get away with these things, but eventually life catches up to you. So the whole calorie counting scene, you could say, frustrates me because it's very fucking hard to stay in a calorie deficit if a large percentage of those foods are coming from, processed and packaged stuff. Because as I said, very calorie dense and nutrient poor. I quite regularly use the example for people that, we could get you to eat half a kilo of sweet potato and you feel like a stuffed turkey because that's a huge volume of food, and you just took in the same amount of carbohydrates as what you would have taken in if you had one Mars bar. And the Mars bar took you all of 30 seconds to consume. It came with maybe a little energy spike shortly followed by an energy crash, along with some inflammation and very little satiety. And I think a lot of people forget that satiety is actually created in the brain. So, I view diabetes and obesity in a way as a bit of a disease of the brain, if anything, because that's where these hunger signals are coming from. And so much of our nutrition is habitual. I am a sweet tooth. I have always been a sweet tooth. I find it really interesting, even speaking with my mum. She was a sweet tooth while she was pregnant with me, whereas with my sisters, she was very much into savory foods. And that is actually evident in our guilty pleasures when I compare me to my siblings. But, I also grew up in a time where Brett Lee was the poster boy of Wheat Bix, and he was my idol. And so I would eat 6 Wheat Bix and put raw sugar on top, and that was my breakfast. And I wonder why I went off to school and couldn't concentrate and was made out to be like I was stupid and nothing stuck. But knowing what I know now, I look back and can laugh about it and give myself a lot of empathy. Be like, no wonder you couldn't concentrate. No wonder you couldn't focus, or you had some pretty erratic mood swings, you could say. So we're just living in a world, man, where everybody has been trained to seek the most convenient route, whether that be with relationships on Tinder and dating apps, whether it be on nutrition. You no longer need to be a hunter and a gatherer. Everything that you want is in the palm of your hand through Uber Eats or at a convenience store near you. So that really, I believe, is one of that's the driving factor to why we see that 66% that you are talking about today.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to take your take on the calorie counting that I have with my PT and nutrition clients as well. Is that seeing that as I can't remember where I heard it first, but like seeing it as the tracing paper when you were first learning to write, and so with that tracing paper you also had a teacher. You didn't have the paper on your own, so you had that guidance. So a good coach, if like 100% to your point, it fucking doesn't work for a lot of people because they go, I'm not going to do that. I don't have enough time. And if they say they're not going to do it, just take their word for it. They're probably not going to do it properly. But someone that is keen on it, it's like, well, this is a tool where they still maybe, they scan a barcode and they go, holy shit, didn't realize that food had that much in it. Or, oh, wow, that's a really low calorie food. I'm so surprised. I'm going to try and eat more of this. But it comes with that education. So if you're an online coach and you go 2,500 calories, 120 grams of protein, have a great life. Well, then that model doesn't quite work. If you can, handheld them through that, then for some people it can work, but still not for everyone, 100%.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think that calorie counting is a really beneficial exercise for someone to go through, even if it be for a 2-week period, whether that be at the beginning of your journey or whether that be once a year, because you just revisit it to see what you're actually doing. Because as you said, it can be very eye-opening and give you that little light bulb moment to go, oh, fuck, yeah, okay, I am eating way more than what I thought I was, or, oh, wow, I'm eating way less than what I thought I was. And obviously, dependent on what your goal is, you have improved your nutritional literacy from going through that experiment and seeing what is in what foods, and ultimately making better decisions. But I certainly think that if you are governed to the calorie calculator long term as your management strategy, then you're going to be forever, it's going to be short lived, because as soon as you come off it, it's going to blow out.
What about like your takes on different methods and things like that? A lot of people are going to go crazy about, say, an intermittent fasting or something like that. And your take on that just being kind of, in my eyes, interesting to see yours, whether that's just a method to achieve the principle of that deficit. But are there any other benefits as well?
Yeah, I used to be a little bit more hard-headed about, picking and choosing whether or not that individual should be doing intermittent fasted because maybe I thought it wasn't the very best idea for them if they were suffering with high stress. And we know that in, fasted states, we're going to get an upregulation of catecholamines and other stress hormones and so forth. And maybe that's not the best option for them. But you're exactly right. At the end of the day, the inner workings of something like an intermittent fasting strategy is just to serve as calorie control. And for some people, it does work really well. And I have become a little bit more flexible to say I don't really want to fuck with that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
The most important thing to I think look at is the relationship with food and the nutritional habits um, that are occurring in that 8 hours. If you're somebody who just then gets to that window of eating and just pigs out, then it hasn't really served its purpose at all. If anything, it maybe has been counterintuitive and backfired because it's created that excessive overcompensation type behavior in that short period of eating. But you know, you were asking about other strategies and methods that I perhaps use with my clients. I developed a protein point system. So again, when educating clients, I find educated clients are always more adherent. All right, and I draw to that conclusion from just inherently being very stubborn myself. If I don't know why I'm doing it, I'm probably not going to do it. So when we look at, as I've discussed already today, the topic of satiety and that actually being within the brain, we know that protein has the greatest satiety to any other macronutrient in comparison to carbohydrates and fats. And again, just bringing that down to a layman term for my clients, I'm sure we've all had the experience where you've sat there with a big bowl of pasta or rice or whatever it may be, and I'm stuffed, I'm full, and you sit there on the couch for 10 minutes, and then you have another go at it, and that might occur a couple of times, but usually if you put a 2 kilo steak on someone's plate, there's going to come a point where they just don't want anymore. They don't necessarily feel stuffed and they don't necessarily feel full. They just don't want anymore. Satiety has been achieved, and really that's what we're going for. But it's quite ironic, that we can we don't feel satisfied. So many people don't feel satisfied until they're absolutely stuffed and bloated. But then they complain that they're stuffed and bloated and feel like shit. So, I really drive a nutritional philosophy that revolves around protein, not just because of the satiety mechanisms. We know that protein's got the highest thermic effect of food, so that inherently, if two people were eating a 2,500 calorie diet, but one of those diets came from 50% protein, one of them came with 20% protein. We know that looking at the total daily energy expenditure for that individual on the 50% protein is going to be much higher, just due to, I guess, the thermic effect of food, the energy that has been dispelled in the digestive process breaking down meats. So there's another factor there. Another one, I am by no means anti-vegetable or, a strict carnivore guy, despite a lot of people think I am, just because I'm a big advocate of and lover of meats myself. Um, at the same time with that, I think, carnivore can be a really fantastic short-term intervention and strategy for some people to lose weight and just to experience and try. Why not? What's the worst that's going to happen from doing it? Probably not much. But is it the best long-term strategy for people? No, not at all, probably. But when I ask people typically, hey, why do you eat your fruits and vegetables? The generic answer you're usually going to get is, because of my vitamins and my minerals, and then the only other one that they'll usually give you is fiber. And when we look at the nutrient density from a micronutrient point of view, meat has 100 times more bioavailable nutrients and vitamins in it than any vegetable does. On top of that, we're getting all the amino acids as well that are going towards building not just muscle tissue, but they are the building blocks for the neurotransmitters in our brain. So the dopamine, the acetylcholine, which is giving us not just problem solving abilities, but also the drive and the motivation to actually go make the inconvenient choice, which is cooking your own fucking food, which is going to the gym, and being your own motivator. So, big advocate of protein, and to try and help people in the calorie counting confusion, I guess you could say, is I've developed a system where 100 grams of meat is 4 points and an egg is 1. Right. And then based on your size as a bloke, maybe I'll say, all right, and it might be a starting point. I want you to get 24 points for the day. Do you do it in 2 meals, 3 meals, 4 meals, with chicken, fish, beef, or eggs? I don't give a fuck. You do. That's your goal, because I know that if you hit those points, you're going to have consumed the protein. You're going to have got the micronutrients in that we want you to get in. We're going to get the amino acids in that we want you to get in. We're more likely going to achieve satiety in the brain. And if the remaining 80 to 90% of the calories are coming from foods that have been provided to us by the earth, that you're probably not going to overeat. Because like I said, even with that sweet potato, good luck. Eat as much as you fucking want. You're probably not going to overeat those calories, So I've found that to be a really effective, a simple strategy for blokes to be able to follow and work on, that gives them flexibility within their day, that if something missed because of a meeting, doesn't matter. The baby's not out with the bathwater. You can make that up in the next meal. The whole plan hasn't been a failure. So if anything, man, it's just, I've found one of the keys to getting successful outcomes and results with the clients is being flexible and working with that client as the individual to develop a strategy that's going to allow them. If that's counting calories, great. Fuck yeah, let's do that. If that's using something like the protein point system, then mad, let's do that. If that's someone who's just, viewing their nutrition as a form of loving nourishment and self-respect, and trying to only take in foods that are in that anti-inflammatory umbrella, then great, let's do that. If you do that, you're going to be doing better than the other 66% that we were talking about anyway. We're not trying to get you on stage in fake 10 and a fucking G-string tomorrow, so we probably don't have to be that fucking rigid.
Yeah, yeah. So then what comes with some of the risks, I guess, with, like you said, a carnivore diet where, say, from a weight loss, a big point of that would be, well, weight loss alone is like, well, remove a food group, kind of, in a sense. You're removing a lot of the carb, you're still having potatoes, but you're removing the fruits and vegetables. Big food group gone. Say someone goes low carb, they're removing the carbs, they're probably going to decrease calories. Low fat, they're probably going to decrease calories. But with the removal of these large food groups or macronutrients, what are some of the risks involved with that? Like you said, carnivore, you may not want to do it long term. Why would that be the case?
Well, one of the reasons might be, for example, someone has biliary issues. So if you're putting someone on a really high fat carnivore keto style diet, and they're having a hard time assimilating and digesting fats, you're probably setting that person up for a bad time. So there is one example. Another may be, a risk potentially associated with removing an entire food group like carbohydrates, is a lot of those foods contain resistant starches, which act as, I guess, a building block for gut microbiome and our immune system and so forth. And thirdly, we could look at athletic performance. If you're someone who's, engaging in really high intensity activity, whether that be resistance training, whether that be sprinting, whether that be, a game of footy, whether that be jiu-jitsu, you're going to need some carbohydrates. It is undeniable that carbohydrates are going to be the fuel for your performance, and you may well start to suffer from an endurance and a strength and a recovery perspective in the absence of carbohydrates altogether.
Yeah. What about the conversation of like cholesterol and things like that? That's a common thing that people go, oh, you're eating too much red meat or too much meat in general.
Yeah, well, when we look at the statements of eating too much red meat, and red meat, being carcinogens and causing cancer, a lot of those are from really low quality research, where they're frequency food score studies, where someone will tick along, oh, do you eat salami? Do you eat pizzas? And that's the red meat that they're talking about. And that same person might also smoke and drink alcohol, and so they've drawn to the conclusion of correlation there, that all of a sudden red meat causes you cancer. There is no evidence out there to show that eating grass-fed organic beef from the earth has any negative health implications. But when we do look at cholesterol levels, of course, there's different components of cholesterol, but by no means is eating dietary cholesterol like saturated fat going to result in elevated lipids. Right, so there's no connection there to dietary cholesterol, and I suppose what's showing up on your blood markers there. If anything, usually what I see with when we're looking at the cholesterol panels, we want to have a look at somebody's not just their LDL, but looking at their triglycerides, given they're probably a better indicator of longevity, and those triglycerides are more likely going to be elevated from polyunsaturated fats, so PUFAs like vegetable and seed oils, and also, diets that are really high in sugar, and maybe someone who's suffering with a little bit of insulin resistance.
I guess that would be a similar thing. Like it's that the point you made there of the bundling it together. Why a lot of the times people will say that the vegan diet is so much better is because a lot of the time vegans are just health seeking people more so than maybe these people that they're putting into the buckets as well. Like because a vegan diet can be quite hard to sustain, their level of effort is higher. Therefore, they're probably more aware of the things they're doing in a general sense as well.
The same thing. You could say let's look at the traditional Western diet, whether that be Australian, the UK, or American. It's not great. So if you decide to go vegan, well, guess what? You just cut out cheeseburgers and, highly processed meats like salamis and these sorts of things. And if you rid yourself of a lot of those kinds of foods, then I'm not surprised that we've seen an improvement in your health markers over a 3 to 6 month period. If you've cut out an entire food group, we were just talking about it before, guess what? You're going to create a calorie deficit. You're going to lose weight. And if you lose weight, again, we're probably going to see an improvement in health markers across the board. So I'm not really interested in somebody's results that they achieve over a 3 to 6 month period by making the decision to go vegan as such, rather than let's have a look at them in 2 years' time. Because now I really know that you're going to probably start to see the effects of those decisions across a long-term period, because we are going to be suffering from certain nutrient deficiencies due to just the lack of food volume and the bioavailability from the food groups that we are eating or not eating.
Do you think like obviously processed foods being, or ultra processed specifically being a big thing we're battling in Western society, like people should, rather than kind of debating vegan, carnivore, or all these sort of battles as well, it's more trying to just encourage the use of more whole foods, less barcodes, and to your point there, like you go vegan, you're going to see some benefits as well, but like it's that whole food approach that really has an overarching massive benefit.
Couldn't agree more. I am, again, like I said, most people that I'm dealing with these days aren't bodybuilders. So, who am I to say that you can't have a fucking ice cream on a Friday night? Like, who cares? But when we got to look at the total picture, like I certainly don't. One of the things that I don't necessarily agree with is you'll hear coaches say there's no such thing as good foods or bad foods. It's just the whole diet. And, they're not wrong in what they're saying. But it's sort of lacking a little bit of context, because it's still pretty hard to argue that, a fucking bag of Skittles is a good food selection. Could you argue that a couple Skittles and someone who's got a, good gut health, high athletic output, eats 3,000 calories a day, 200 grams of that, 200 grams of protein? Sure, it's a piss in the ocean. And they're using it straight before they're doing some really high intensity exercise, and there's really been no major detriment to their physiology and function from that food selection. But that's a pretty niche kind of individual that we're talking about there. So again, what I see happen a lot is people will wake up, they have a coffee, suppresses the appetite. They're driving the stress hormone straight away. They haven't actually hydrated with water and electrolytes. They haven't actually started the day with any protein. And then, it gets to the lunchtime or the mid-afternoon, and that's where all of a sudden you're getting the energy crash. You are underprepared. You need something that's quick and convenient because you've got to get back to work. So you're just grabbing whatever's available and on the go and absolutely just shoveling this shit in. And then when, you might get home and you might have a half decent dinner if you're lucky. And then we have a look at, okay, well, what do you consume for the whole day? Well, 60% of the calories that you consume today were from shit versus, this person, this bloke, he's been really good. He's been hitting his 24 protein points every day. He's been having 2 servings of fruit a day. And we've said, eat as many carbs as you want at nighttime, mate, whether it comes from rices, potatoes, maybe a bit of gluten-free pasta here and there. You're having a few salads and veg again throughout the week. And then, mate, you had an ice cream a couple nights a week. Paddle pop was 150 calories. A Magnum was 300. But out of the entire week, less than 5% of that's being contributed to from, it doesn't mean you can't eat the foods that you enjoy. We just got to have a look at how much that's actually contributing to the total picture.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see how, I think coaching with, I guess that if it fits your macros was probably the peak gone too far with, I guess, some of this stuff where it was kind of like, you'll be fine. It's all good. And I guess the doctor or whatever it was that did the Skittles diet or the Twinkies diet or whatever. And it's like, sure, you could maintain a low body fat or a healthy body fat. It's like, but there's so many more layers to health than just that.
Exactly. And that's the kind of thing, it's the if it fits your macros and the scenario that you just kind of described, which is what magnifies the issues that are going on underneath the surface. So, yeah, the person might look good on the outside, but they are riddled with low energy, poor digestion, low libido, ED, mental health issues, anxiety, irritability, concentration issues. The list can go on. It might be pain. We know that you're going to get elevated perception of pain from a high inflammatory style diet. Might be someone who's perhaps susceptible to melanoma and skin cancer. Well, we know that high seed and vegetable oil consumption seems to be, not only contributing to the epigenetics, increasing your likelihood of these cancers and so forth, but your skin burns more when you've been consuming vegetable and seed oils. So, yeah, it is. It's a complex issue, and it's, if anything, mate, I think people just forget. It's a testament to the human body on how fucking amazing and resilient we really are, that you can treat your body like a garbage bin and fucking get away with it. But you can get away with it until you can't. And for most people, it's usually around their mid to late 20s where it does start to catch up to us, So that's what I see on the daily basis right now.
Yeah. Interesting point. Like I've seen a lot with clients as well, or just people doing their shopping. And they go, "Oh, I got the low carb version, or I got the low fat version." How careful do people need to be of this, or the high protein? Because it seems that the labeling of these things is way too easy.
It is. I'm convinced that false advertising isn't actually a real thing because it's like legalized everywhere. Yeah, it is. It is everywhere. But you're right. It's any sort of, again, packet that seems to say, only 90 calories per serving or something of this nature, it is a little bit of a red flag. It's a bit of a smokescreen. It's a little bit of a fugazi. It's a distraction from, okay, don't look at the ingredients list. And again, I'm not saying that, hey, time and a place, that these lower calorie versions that maybe give you a little bit of psychological relief and you enjoyed that food and it made it easier for you to be compliant to your diet, and you're not someone who's suffering with dysbiosis or running a really strict and rigid gut protocol, for example. Maybe you can get away with that time and a place, but again, it should only be a small contribution to what the total picture is if you want to live, I guess, a high performing optimal life, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I guess a good example of that is kind of soft drinks, Cokes, all those sort of things, and the sugar-free alternatives. It's like if you're smashing four buddy Cokes a day, then the sugar-free alternative is an excellent option. If you're drinking water all day, then choosing the sugar-free option is not a great option. Like it depends on what your starting point is as well.
Mate, it's a bit like vapes. Like, yeah, cool. Vapes might not be as harmful as cigarettes, but that doesn't make them healthy. And if we look
No.
at the human behavior that goes on with vapes, is it's not uncommon for people to report that they start vaping more than what they were smoking. So any of the small difference that was there in terms of it being not as bad, you've probably just caught up through sheer volume.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess it's a challenge in that sense as well. Like, I mean, the vapes maybe, we'll probably find out soon enough that they're, just as bad. But like that barrier to entry with something like that, with a vape as a prime example, is, well, not many 16-year-olds are going to run around and be like, dude, can't wait to pack up, grab a pack of ciggies from the supermarket at the end of the day. But they're more than happy to go online and buy a vape. So you've actually increased, despite if they're not as bad for you, well, now you've got maybe 10x the amount of people consuming them.
And they can get away with it, because you're not going to reek of ciggies.
Yeah, exactly. You can have your nice blueberry bubble gum or something like that at the end of the day. So that's quite nice. I'd be quite interested to see, we've talked a lot about stress and the need for physical and mental stimulation as well. Obviously being Melbourne based, you went through large portions of lockdowns in the previous years. I've seen a little bit of, your kind of take on some of these things. I'd be interested, how you dealt, I guess, with getting yourself back up and running, because that same, someone might be going through a similar sort of period without a lockdown of just, they've come from big times where they're not doing much activity or haven't been able to. How did you kind of get yourself back on the wheel?
I don't know. I think I've just always had a mentality and it's a belief that, hey, no one's coming to fucking save you. No one's coming to do the work for you. That I can be upset, I can cry about it, but it's not gonna change anything. So at the end of the day, what the fuck are you gonna do about it? And that's where I think sometimes you just gotta pick up, pull your big boy pants up and get on with things, because I don't want to be toxic with positivity either, because I feel like that's the natural reaction to a lot of people. Sometimes be like, oh, well, you still be grateful because people have got it worse and people are doing those things, and it doesn't really fucking help anyone in the moment. But at the same time, I think it is important to have a look at those things and try and replace a lot of what you feel is perhaps absent, and replace it with what you are grateful for and all the things that you do have. But no, it was nothing in particular there, man, other than it is what it is. I'm an unemployable degenerate, and I decide to live life on my terms, and this is what comes with that lifestyle. It's the ebbs and flows of business, and that was definitely a deep, dark part of this journey that was. And by no means did I get through that all roses and smiles. It was extremely difficult emotionally, and mentally, financially. I had just sold my previous business and my gym, and spent every dollar I had to my name to open up Jungle HQ. And Living Rewired wasn't even a thing then in terms of the online health and performance coaching space. And we were only 3 months into operation, and that all got shut down. It was really, really tough. And then, to make matters worse, in the middle of that, I got diagnosed with testicular cancer, and just that was about probably 2 weeks or a week before my 30th birthday. Which then the day that I actually had surgery to remove one of my testicles, I came out of that surgery, and there'd been an announcement, and gyms were still not allowed to open, but I'm pretty sure the brothels were. So when you're looking at, and that's not a dig at any sex worker, I couldn't give a fuck, but I think they all should have been open. But to have that realization that you're here running something that's meant to be, healthy and positive and trying to contribute to, the community and our society in a meaningful way, to then, and while also obviously having gone deep down the rabbit hole of trying to very, very best understand this virus and what can be done as prevention, and what, how serious it actually was. It was a bitter pill to be force fed and made swallow. So, but again, that brings me full circle, man. Like, what the fuck am I going to do about it? Me sitting here complaining to you 3 years on the fact that doesn't change anything. What's done is done. So, I think a lot of us as business owners and people who work for ourselves, we are control freaks, and it's sometimes really hard to let go of that. But your problems really are what you make them. And if there are things that are outside of my control, then, I could also sit here and say, well, great, that was a blessing. It was a lesson that I needed to learn on how to let go of the things that I actually can't have in control, and how do I manage my field of view and my reality, because at the end of the day, your reality is whatever your consciousness wants it to be.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I guess in there you touched on, obviously, like the more online sort of approach that you're taking now. I've got an interesting sort of take on this, and so you've been a face-to-face trainer, you've walked the gym floor, all this sort of stuff. Do you think people need to walk the walk when it comes to then becoming the online coach or having some form of skin in the game online?
Yep. In the long and the short answer, yep. I mean, I get it. It's the way all industries evolve. I've been around the fitness industry for 15 years. I've been a gym owner across 2 different gyms for over 10 now, and I've seen things change. And I do believe that the future of personal training in the highest form of, service delivery is probably a combination of both of those things. Because it doesn't matter even how much experience that I've had on the gym floor and what I put in place to teach you to the best of my ability through a computer screen, nothing will substitute for what we can do in a face-to-face setting where we've got immediate feedback and cues and 360 field of, perspective, and just nothing is going to compare to that. But it's in the, fitness has become very popular. We can go right back even to like when Arnie was in the gym. They were the weirdos. Like fitness wasn't really cool yet, and it has become a lot more. It's become a lot cooler, I suppose you could say. But even looking back on when I started in the industry, what originally got me into this space was after seeing the deterioration of mental health brought on from eating disorders and ultimately, self-harming in two really important young females to me. One of them was an ex-girlfriend at high school, and one of them was a family member. And in my immature, inexperienced brain, I didn't understand what was going on in where young, beautiful women felt this level of self-hatred towards themselves for not being, thin enough. And that was what motivated me to get into this space. And for a long time, probably the best part of 10 years, my motivation was women. And now you look around the commercial gym, there's more chicks in the gym than we've ever seen. There's chicks that are stronger than blokes. It's awesome. Fucking well done, girls. I couldn't be happier to see it. And, I think the training IQ across the board is becoming better and better in the commercial gym setting. So, fitness is growing. The industry is growing. It is really popular. But the appeal of the online coach who can work from home and doesn't have a boss and can be remote and work wherever they want. It has its appeal. I think a lot of people get into it and realize that it's not all cracked out to be. It's not all that it's cracked out to be. And you're also not guaranteed to just have fucking clients running through your door day one just because you went and did a certificate 3 and 4 in fitness. There's a very small minutia of that I think we all aspire to be. You could use James Smith as the prime example. He's probably the most successful PT in the world. He's making millions of dollars and he's done it all pretty much online. But, not even probably 0.1% of people that have got a qualification in fitness are going to ever achieve that sort of status. I would argue that even 1% of online coaches are earning north of $100,000 a year. So it's not as easy as what people make it out to be, but more specific to your question, I do find it quite outrageous that people will give their money and hand it over to somebody who has never done face-to-face or who has only been qualified or training themselves for 12 months. And that doesn't mean that they can't give value and help somebody, but I just think it's really important, and it comes down to the integrity of that coach to stay in their lane and work with people that are at a stage in their journey of where they can help them. But even with that being said, they probably could get better help.
Yeah, I think also like to your point though, that for the PT themselves or the online coach themselves, and I'll put my hand up and say this, sitting on your laptop and writing programs all day fucking sucks. Like it's not most PTs, they got into the industry because they went, I don't want to work in an office. I want to work in a gym. And then all of a sudden you've gone and seen this, flashy object is online coaching, and you pursue that path and you realize it's not what it was meant to be. It's not as great for you, and it's not as great for your clients necessarily. And to your, you said the hybrid model, it's absolutely amazing. It's something that, you might get some touch points with your clients once or twice a week. And then, so you're fixing technique and then you program for the rest of it.
100%, mate. It's interesting. Like, I don't necessarily need to be here in jungle at the gym. I don't do anything on the gym floor and haven't for years. I did some, through COVID out of a necessity to pay the bills and pay the debt that was heavily accumulating. But I choose to come in here because of exactly what you just said. We all know what isolation feels like. And I don't want to continue on that. You're very numb just sitting and looking at your computer screen all day, and that doesn't tie into my values of health and how I want to live. I vibe and feed off other people's energy and connection, and really that's what I'm coming into the gym for, is to have contact with my coaches, be in and around the clients and the members, and that's where you can get a lot of your inspiration from a content point of view, right? It's just by listening to other people. What questions are they asking? Because if they're asking the question, there's a fucking million other people out there with the exact same question, no matter how simple that might seem to you and I, because that's what we do for a living. We got to remember that we are not necessarily our audience. So, being in and around people can serve as, benefit across the board.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, I really appreciate your time, Jack. There's a lot of value in there for everyone to walk away with. I'm sure, this is going to really help people on their journey as well. So I thank you so much for your time.
Mate, no worries. Thanks for having me on. It was good to have a chat.